April Jensen never imagined that moving into her new stepdad, Roy Mather's old farmhouse, would unlock a nightmare buried deep beneath the floorboards. A secret so dark it would shatter her family and uncover horrors no one in Marble Creek was ready to face. What was Roy hiding behind that locked basement door? And how many lives had vanished without a trace, trapped in silence beneath the very house they called home? The move to Marble Creek wasn't something April Jensen had chosen. At 17, she was used to her opinions being ignored, but this felt different. After everything they'd been through in the past 2 years, the divorce, the financial problems, and the cramped apartment in the city, her mother, Linda, said they needed peace. Roy Mathers, Linda's new husband, had found the farmhouse himself, said it had good bones. That phrase stuck with April in a way she couldn't explain. Through the outside, the house looked like something out of an old postcard. Weathered white paint, wraparound porch, wild ivy crawling up the side like fingers trying to reclaim it. Roy had renovated the inside almost entirely by himself, which he took great pride in. He was a handyman, quiet and precise, always with a set of tools nearby. To Linda he was a dream, a man who could fix broken sinks and cook dinner. To April, he was a stranger who had inserted himself into their lives too quickly and too smoothly. Her first night in the house was strangely quiet, too quiet. Back in the city, the noise had become background music, sirens, neighbors arguing, the hum of traffic. Here, the silence rang in her ears. As she lay in bed, the house breathed around her, wood settling, pipes groaning, something tapping faintly behind the walls. She told herself it was just an old house doing old house things. Still, she turned on her lamp and kept it on all night. Roy spent most of his time in the basement. He said it was where he could focus. April found that odd, considering the rest of the house was practically empty during the day, but Roy insisted the light was better downstairs, and he liked being surrounded by the foundation. That phrase struck her, too. There was something in the way he said it, like the foundation wasn't just concrete and beams, but something deeper, more personal. The basement was off limits. Roy didn't say it outright, but the message was clear. The door was always locked, and if April asked about it, Linda would jump to defend him. "He just wants a little space," she'd say. "After all, he put so much work into this house." April wandered the upstairs halls while her mother was at work. The air always felt cooler near the floor vents. Sometimes she caught strange smells, brief and faint, like damp soil or rusted metal. She tried to ignore them, but once she crouched by a vent and leaned in. There was nothing, just the dark mouth of a shaft leading down into the unknown. She heard nothing, but it felt like something was listening. The nights became more unsettling. She would hear creaks outside her door, slow and deliberate, like footsteps. Once, she opened it quickly and found the hallway empty. Another time, she awoke to the sound of something dragging across the floor downstairs. In the morning, the furniture looked untouched, but one of the wooden chairs had a scratch on the leg that hadn't been there before. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows through the blinds, April explored the attic. She found boxes of old tools, yellowed wallpaper, and an old mirror draped in cloth. Nothing remarkable until she noticed a set of blueprints tucked behind a beam. They were for the house. But the basement floor plan didn't match. It showed a second room, sealed off behind a wall. Her stomach dropped. Why would Roy hide a room? That night, she sat at her desk and stared at the blueprints, tracing the lines with her fingers. Something about the shapes beneath the house, the way they bent and looped, made her skin prickle. The sealed room was directly beneath her own bedroom. For the first time, April realized something she hadn't wanted to admit. The house didn't feel strange because it was old. It felt strange because something was wrong. April began waking up at the same time every night, 2:17 a.m. It wasn't her alarm, and it wasn't a coincidence. At first she thought it was just her internal clock adjusting to the quiet of the countryside, but the consistency became too hard to ignore. Each time she'd sit up in bed, heart already beating too fast, ears tuned to the house around her. The silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt unnatural, like the house was holding its breath. She began noticing other things, small subtle details that anyone else might overlook. Her socks, folded in neat pairs in her drawer, began appearing slightly rumpled, twisted the wrong way. Her textbooks sometimes shifted position on her desk. One afternoon she returned from school and found her phone, always left charging on her nightstand, unplugged and lying on the windowsill. Linda brushed it off. "You probably just forgot where you put it, sweetheart." April wanted to believe her. Then came the scratches. She was vacuuming her room one Saturday when she noticed the edge of her rug had curled up. She bent down to fix it and froze. Beneath the rug, in the polished wooden floorboards, were 3 deep, parallel scratch marks. Straight lines, jagged at the edges, like someone had dragged something heavy or sharp across the wood. The marks were faintly old, but not too old. They led from the center of the room directly toward her closet. She pushed the rug back quickly and didn't tell her mother. She began writing everything down. Not just the scratches, but every strange occurrence. She listed each noise she heard at night, when it started, how long it lasted, where she thought it came from. She tracked temperatures in different rooms. She recorded the smell that sometimes came from the vents, a scent that didn't belong in any home, musty and metallic, like wet copper. The smell was strongest in the hallway, outside Roy's basement door. April tried to be discreet, but Roy was observant. Too observant. He never asked her directly what she was doing, but she noticed how often he glanced at her journal when he thought she wasn't looking. He'd linger near her doorway longer than necessary. Once she caught him staring through the hallway mirror. His reflection perfectly still, his eyes locked on her. When she blinked, he was gone. One night, when Linda was working the closing shift at the diner, April made her move. She waited until she heard Roy's footsteps move from the kitchen down into the basement. The door creaked shut, followed by the sharp click of the lock. She waited 5 more minutes, heart pounding, then quietly crept down the stairs. She had seen Roy use a small bronze key he kept in his jeans pocket. April, however, had spent the last week practicing with a hairpin and tension wrench she'd found in an old box of her father's belongings. It took her 4 tries, but the lock finally clicked open. The basement was colder than she expected. A single bare bulb swung slowly overhead, casting shifting shadows across the walls. Half the basement looked normal. Storage shelves, bins, tools. But then her eyes landed on the far wall. It was newer than the others. The paint was smoother, the lines cleaner. It didn't match the age of the rest of the basement. She stepped closer and tapped it. "Hollow! Not! Just hollow!" "Echoing?" She leaned in, pressing her ear against the wall. The surface was cold. For a long moment she heard nothing. Then, barely audible through the silence, came a dull thud. Once, then again, and again. She backed away, breath caught in her throat. April bolted upstairs and relocked the basement door. She returned to her room and sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the vent on her floor. That night the temperature dropped without warning. The sound returned at 2:17. This time louder, heavier. A dragging sound beneath the boards. The scratches made sense now. Someone, or something, was trying to get out. Oppressive claws, heavier. It clung to her like fog. She could feel it before she opened her eyes, as if the air in the room had changed. Denser, colder, almost aware of her. Something had shifted the moment she found the hollow wall in the basement. She hadn't told Linda. She wanted to, but something in her mother's face stopped her. Linda looked tired lately, not just from work. Exhausted, drained, Like something invisible was pulling her down day by day. April noticed her mother forgetting things, small things at first. Where she left her keys, what time her shift started. Then it got worse. One evening, Linda stood in the kitchen, staring into the refrigerator, unmoving, for nearly 10 minutes. When April asked if she was okay, Linda blinked like waking from a trance, and smiled faintly. "Just thinking," she whispered, but her eyes were blank. The smell returned, stronger now, no longer fleeting. It drifted through the vents in waves, putrid, damp, and coppery. April first caught it in the hallway, then in the bathroom, and finally in her own bedroom. It grew unbearable at night. She stuffed towels under the door and windows, but nothing helped. She even taped the floor vent shut, but it only hissed louder, like air being pushed through from something below that didn't want to stay there. One morning, while Linda slept in unusually late, April tore the towel from the hallway vent and unscrewed the cover. Inside, she found dirt. Not just dust, but loose, blackened soil. It was clumped, damp, and embedded with something coarse. At first she thought it was lint, until she pulled out a clump of human hair. Long, tangled, and unmistakably not hers. She staggered back, covering her mouth. That same day, April skipped school and biked into town. She went to the public library and searched missing persons reports from the last 20 years. Marble Creek was small, but people had gone missing before. One woman in particular caught her attention. Anna Beth Cole, age 24, disappeared in 2006. The photo showed a soft-featured woman with a tired smile and shoulder-length hair. Her last known address? A farmhouse on the outskirts of town, the same one April now lived in. When she showed the article to the librarian, the woman went quiet. She asked where April found the story. April lied and said it was for a school project. The librarian hesitated, then said, quietly, "That house has a history. It's changed hands more times than people remember. No one stays for long." Back home, Linda had a migraine and lay on the couch, pale and shivering under a thick blanket. Roy was making soup in the kitchen, whistling tunelessly. April watched him stir the pot, his back perfectly straight, his posture calm. Nothing in his expression gave away anything, no flicker of guilt, no shadow of fear. But April knew now. There had been others. That night she opened the journal and began writing a new entry, this one longer than any before. She listed the smells, the sounds, the scratch marks, and now the hair. At the bottom of the page she wrote a single question. How many people has he put under this floor? She didn't sleep. The noise returned at exactly 2:17, only this time it wasn't a dragging sound. It was breathing. Deep, slow, and uneven. It came from the vent, raspy and close. April covered her mouth and backed away from the wall, barely daring to blink. She felt it, for the first time, not just as a sound, but as a presence. Something beneath the floor knew she had found it. And it was waiting. Detective Carla Hines was not easily convinced. Marble Creek had its share of odd stories and strange rumors, but few ever led to anything concrete. When April's anonymous tip came in, the case seemed like another whisper in the wind. Until April showed up at the station, clutching her journal and the blueprints she'd found. Carla read through the detailed notes and studied the floor plan discrepancy. The sealed room beneath the basement wasn't on any official record. A search warrant was quickly granted. The day the police arrived at the farmhouse, the air felt thick with tension. Neighbors gathered behind yellow tape, their faces a mix of curiosity and fear. Roy Mathers stood outside the house, calm and collected. His expression was unreadable as the officers moved in. April stayed back with Linda, who was shaking but silent. Eyes fixed on the ground, Carla led the team to the basement. The normal half was cleared quickly. Boxes, old tools, the smell of dust and stale air. Then they reached the new wall. The one April had tapped and found hollow. The officers began removing the drywall. Behind it was a narrow doorway. sealed not just by wood but by thick steel beams and a heavy lock. It had been hidden with precision, almost like a vault. They broke the lock open, and a foul, rotten stench spilled out, making several officers cover their noses. Inside was a cramped, windowless room, barely large enough to stand in. The floor was dirt, uneven and cold. In the dim flashlight beams, the team found evidence that made their blood run cold. Clothes stained with old blood, strands of hair, and items that belonged to people missing from the nearby towns. The most horrifying discovery came when the officers uncovered human remains, carefully wrapped and hidden beneath loose dirt and debris. At least 3 sets of bones, 2 adults, 1 child. Each had been buried in separate sections of the secret room, hidden from the world for years. The identification process later confirmed one belonged to Annabeth Cole, the woman April had read about at the library. Carla watched Roy carefully during the investigation. When they finally confronted him with the evidence, Roy did not panic. Instead, he spoke in a low, calm voice. The words chilled Carla to her core. He admitted to everything. Over the last 2 decades, Roy had hunted women who trusted him, repairing their homes, befriending them, and then trapping them beneath the floors they lived on. The basement was his signature. Every home he worked on held a secret like this, buried under layers of wood and paint. Linda was crushed, her entire world unraveling. She hadn't seen the man behind the mask, the darkness hiding beneath the surface. She realized that the warmth Roy showed her was a dangerous lie. April's mind raced with every detail Carla shared during the interview. How could Roy have been so close all these years without anyone noticing? The precision, the patience. It was terrifying. The house itself was a trap, built to hide unspeakable horrors beneath its foundation. But there was one question left unanswered. The blueprints had shown only one secret room. What about the others? Carla ordered a full investigation into Roy's previous jobs and homes. As they dug, more evidence surfaced. Disappearances connected to the places Roy had lived. Old neighbors who remembered strange noises at night. Unexplainable renovations where new floors had been laid over sealed rooms. The farmhouse was just the beginning. In the weeks that followed, April and Linda prepared to leave Marble Creek. The house was no longer a home. It was a prison built on secrets and death. But even as they packed, April couldn't shake the feeling that the nightmare wasn't over. Behind their left, she found herself drawn back to her bedroom, to the floorboards she had once thought innocent. As she carefully lifted one loose plank, her fingers brushed something carved deep into the wood, the name. Not hers. Another name, scratched with sharp, deliberate strokes. A name no one had ever reported missing. April's heart pounded as she realized the chilling truth. Roy had chosen this house for more than just its foundation. He had chosen it to keep all his secrets, and some were still buried beneath the floor, waiting to be found. The day the Jensens left the farmhouse was heavy with silence. Linda moved slowly, carrying only what she could hold in her arms, as if trying to take pieces of the house with her. Fragments of a life shattered by hidden horrors. April trailed behind, her gaze fixed on the cracked floorboards beneath her feet. The same boards that had once seemed like part of a normal home, but now felt like a prison's cage. The yellow police tape fluttered weakly in the spring breeze, a grim barrier marking the boundary between past and present. Detective Carla Hines had stayed late the night before, overseeing the final sweep of the property. She refused to leave until every inch had been combed for evidence. The secret room had been sealed shut again by court order, but Carla couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface. Roy Mather's calm demeanor during questioning had unsettled her. He confessed without hesitation, but his silence between words carried a weight deeper than guilt. Something colder and more calculating. Carla had one lingering thought. What if Roy hadn't acted alone? Or what if some secrets still lurked in the shadows of that house, untouched and waiting? April tried to settle into their new life after leaving Marble Creek, but the memories clung to her like a shadow she couldn't shake. At night she would wake suddenly, her heart racing at the faintest sound. She replayed every detail: the scratches, the smells, the hollow wall, the breathing beneath the floor. It felt like the house had followed her in her dreams, whispering warnings she didn't yet understand. One evening, weeks after the move, April found herself back in her old bedroom, standing over the spot where she had discovered the secret room's entrance. Her fingers trembled as she pried up the loose floorboard again. Beneath it lay the name carved deeply into the wood, a name she hadn't recognized before, scrawled in jagged letters that seemed desperate, urgent. It was a girl's name. Not in any missing persons report. No one had ever asked about her. April's stomach churned. How many others had Roy hidden beneath floors, behind walls, beneath layers of time? How many lives had slipped through the cracks, erased from memory? She called Detective Carla. The news was enough to make Carla return to Marble Creek even after everything. Together they arranged a controlled search of the floorboards beneath April's old bedroom. The investigation uncovered a hidden compartment, small, but enough to hold a box. Inside they found personal items: a diary, a locket, photographs yellowed with age. Each belonged to the girl whose name was carved beneath the wood. The diary pages were fragile but legible. They told a story of a young woman who had once dreamed of escape but was trapped by someone she trusted. The entries stopped abruptly, leaving only silence after the final date. April held the diary tightly. She had thought the terror was beneath the floor, only in one room, in one house. But now she knew better. The darkness Roy had built wasn't confined to that farmhouse. It was woven into every place he touched, every life he crossed. Roy's trial was swift. His confession and the overwhelming evidence ensured the jury's verdict: life without parole. But for April and Linda, justice felt incomplete. The wounds left behind were raw and deep, impossible to heal overnight. Carla kept the diary and promised to dig deeper into the missing names, the hidden stories beneath floors and walls, refusing to let the victims' voices fade into silence. April found strength in that promise, in the knowledge that her courage had helped uncover the truth and would help protect others. Before leaving Marble Creek for good, April took one last look at the farmhouse. The front door was boarded up, the windows dark. The house looked empty, but April knew better. It was full of memories, some buried, some waiting, and beneath it all, the terror remained. As the sun set behind the trees, April whispered a silent vow. She would never forget. Not the fear, not the secrets, and not the lives hidden beneath the floorboards. Because sometimes the darkest stories live not in what we see, but in what lies beneath.